you're doing that thing or whatever, it really does come from that place of, oh, okay, thank you for sharing that very important information, because now there's understanding. Even if I still would go, even with all that information, I still wouldn't necessarily handle it the same way, but it's now clarifying as to where you're coming from. And I think that is, and again, we've got so many divides all over the place right now. And even within our own personal relationships, we can have these big divides, like, how could you possibly think this, whatever this might be, and just opening it up and giving the person that safe space to share, and that non-judgmental piece is so important, but it's so challenging. What do you guys do with it when that shows up for you?
Well, sometimes just the power of pause. Get emotionally charged in conversations, especially when we hear something we don't agree with. So sometimes just taking a deep breath and thinking thoughtfully of how we would want to, if we were in their situation, how would we want to be responded to. I was actually, as you were just talking there, thinking back to an episode of one of our favorite shows, Ted Lasso, and it's a really widely popular show right now on Apple TV. And I encourage people just to go check out the whole episode. But there's this one episode, I think it's in season 2, where Ted's this soccer coach in the United Kingdom, and people don't take him seriously. And he's in a bar at one point, and this other former owner of the soccer team kind of challenges him to a duel, throwing darts in this bar. And Ted doesn't let on at all the fact that he grew up playing darts every Sunday with his dad. And the guy challenges him to a duel, and Ted just totally outduels him, because the guy never took the time to ask thoughtful questions. And he quotes the late Walt Whitman, who said that we need to be curious, not judgmental. I think that there's a lot of wisdom there, just that we always there's always more to learn about somebody and their story. So we have to be more curious.
And I love that. Curiosity is one of my favorite words. And I'm always, when I work around communication, curiosity and confusion. It's like, I'm really curious. Tell me more about that. Or I'm confused. I was with you till this point and then I got lost. And to me, that's a way of inviting somebody to continue in a safe way without going, I think you're crazy. What are you talking about? kind of thing. But it's a practice, isn't it? That we just have to kind of make this decision and then practice it.
Absolutely. And the more we hope, the more we practice it, the better we are at it, the better our responses, our lack of response, negative response might be. Practice is, listening is, this, it's intentional. You have to be intentional about it. You have to, and it's hard work to do it well and to do it compassionately. And the more we practice, we hope the better we are at it.
One of the things we talked often about is just how essential it is to have a relationship with somebody that you're going to have like a sincere dialogue with. Because we had referenced earlier about social media and the rise of social media and how that can sometimes be toxic. I just scroll the walls of social media and you see just vitriol sometimes that happens. And generally speaking, I mean, we could have 1,000 friends on Facebook, but how many of those people do you have an authentic relationship with? Probably very few. And so if you're going to enter into a pretty emotionally charged topic with somebody that you know nothing about, it's probably not going to end well. So how do you foster the relationship first, so that way when there is an element of trust involved, that you could have harder conversations about harder topics and more emotionally charged topics?
So I want to remind my listeners that This Is Happily Ever After is just the beginning on webtalkradio.net. I'm Leslie Dories, and I'm talking about communication, specifically compassionate listening, with the founders of Someone to Tell It To, Michael Gingrich and Tom Caton. And if you and your spouse struggle to communicate well, guess what? You're not alone. But the longer this is your status quo, the more damage your relationship will sustain. And if you're ready to learn more effective ways to talk with each other, I can help. I invite you to schedule your free, no obligation 5-star relationship session. You can reach me by email at Leslie, Lesli, at foundationscoachingnc.com. That's FOUNDATIONS coaching, N as in Nancy, C as in Charlie.com. Or you can reach me by phone at area code 919-924-0463. Again, that's 919-924-0463. And I want to get back to this conversation about compassionate listening. So you mentioned this earlier, and it's actually on your website and part of what you guys do. So can you explain the roles of inherent worth and healthy vulnerability to this concept of compassionate listening?
Inherent worth to us is that every single human being has it. that just by virtue of our birth and our existence in this world, in this life, that we all have worth. And that we all have something to say. We all have something to share. Someone to Tell It To, our name comes from a quote by the Australian author Miles Franklin, who wrote that someone to tell it to is one of the fundamental needs of human beings. We believe that is true. We all want validation. We all want to be heard. We want to be noticed. We all have opinions and thoughts and feelings. And we believe that we are all meant to live in connection with one another in so many forms, and that connection, comes when we believe that people deserve it, that we all need it. So there's that part of the answer.
So I'll come back also to something you mentioned earlier, just your first question about what distinguishes compassionate listening from active listening or just listening in general. And I think one of the primary ways that we do distinguish it is very relational. It's less transactional. This is part of the reason why we embarked upon this mission 10 years ago, was because we were realizing there is a whole world full of people that don't have someone to tell it to, hence the name. If the fundamental principle is that everybody needs someone to tell to and we don't have it, then we need to figure out ways to provide it. And, you had asked us about the healthy vulnerability piece. Well, authentic relationships, just inherently, you have to have vulnerability if there's going to be a relationship. It's going to be a pretty shallow relationship. And so one of the things that we do in our listening, when it's appropriate, and this is something that's really important to highlight, when we feel it's appropriate to draw connection. So I'm going to share an example that we shared in our first book. I suffer from a condition called fibromyalgia, and it's not too many men have it, and I do. And we were listening to a woman that we had been listening to periodically for 2 years, every Friday afternoon at a coffee shop. We meet people in safe environments that are comfortable, and a coffee shop was safe for her to tell her story. She had pancreatic cancer, and it was not looking good. And we just kind of expected she would mostly be meeting with us to talk about the looming cancer diagnosis, prognosis. But actually, over time, we found out that she had this other condition that she was also dealing with called restless leg syndrome. And we didn't know much about it, but as we learned about it, she has a really difficult time sleeping. But one morning when we got together, it was first thing in the morning. We met at this coffee shop. And again, we had been meeting for probably the better part of a year at least. She said, I had a really hard time sleeping last night. And I interjected because we had a relationship and just said, I did too. And she asked why. And I told her about my condition with fibromyalgia. And it took our relationship and our connection with her to a much deeper place, because she could see us as human, that we too, just like her, have our own struggles, as we all do. And so again, that healthy vulnerability, there is a balance. I mean, we share vulnerably with our someones when it's appropriate, ultimately foster deeper connection. But if it's to draw attention to ourselves and not to our someones, that's when there's a problem.
And we have a quote that we will often share is when you first don't reveal, you do not heal. That we have to be vulnerable in order to heal. For the someones to whom we listen and support, that helping them to feel safe enough to reveal. And sometimes that does take us revealing some things too. So they feel comfortable knowing that they're not alone in maybe living with some scary things or some scary feelings or emotions. So that we believe that healthy vulnerability is vital to healing, to people finding peace and connections they need.
Well, I mean, and that's the vulnerability. I mean, that is really the doorway into connection, but it can be so scary. And I see how the compassionate listening being seen as having inherent worth, and this idea that I have this worth simply because I'm breathing and I don't have to do anything to earn it. And all these concepts fit really well together, because if I know it's a safe place, then I can share those deeper things. And like you said, then that draws out, oh, well, I didn't sleep well last night, and we find those places of common ground, which is what I really think is needed to bridge a lot of the gap. Sometimes they're artificial. I think many times they're artificial gaps between people. So is that kind of what you guys are out there promoting?
You got it. Yeah, absolutely. You figured that out. Yeah. You probably already knew that too. Yeah, thank you.
So what are some steps that people can do to incorporate compassionate listening into their lives and relationships? What are some of the first things people need to or can jump into?
Oh, wow. Well, I don't know. This is self-promotion, but we have a training team, and in fact, 3 members of our training team, and Tom and I were at a training this morning for a company of 50 people, 50 CPAs, who were learning. We wanted to know how to listen better, how to have deeper relationships, how to be more vulnerable, how to maybe prevent some conflicts, then maybe how to deal with conflicts in a healthy and good way. So anyone can go to our website, and we can give you that address later, but go to our website to look and see about the training opportunities. We also have books that talk a lot, that we've written a lot about those kinds of things, what people can do, what's good maybe not to do. But and as well as a podcast that we have, we are trying to always educate people and put things out there to help people to understand more what healthy vulnerability is like, what doing what we can to prevent conflicts is like, but then dealing well with conflicts when they happen, about not judging, all the things we just talked about. We write, we train, we talk about those things. And it's, if people can, they can get connected in those ways to learn.
And, and so, because this happens to be my own personal little journey that I've decided probably about 5 years ago that this was really an area of my life that I was really going to try to focus on. And that's really about being judgmental. And I do it fairly well, except when I'm driving. And, then I I judge the other drivers. I haven't figured out how to not judge them
Yeah.
because they're just
you're not alone.
because they're just doing